have a friendship that has me at a loss right now. Every time I'm around them, I end up feeling so shitty about myself. All of a sudden, Sam goes, "I doubt you'll get a ring from him. It shouldn't take a year and a half to commit." My older sister and I have mostly always gotten along. She also constantly feels the need to comment on my exercise, diet, body. She often criticizes me for wearing short shorts, as if she didn't wear those kinds of shorts when she was my age. I think she genuinely thinks she's being helpful. Do you have any tips? Welcome back to the Hello Hayes podcast. I'm your host, Hayes, and today on the show, we're answering 3 different advice submissions all about getting judged, being shamed. Why don't I actually just give you an overview? In our first letter, we hear from Slut Shamed, and she is being slut shamed by 2 of her childhood friends, and she asks me, what do I do? Is this friendship worth keeping? In the second letter, we hear from Stressed Sister, who she's mostly had a good relationship with, has been making comments about her body and her skill at their family job. The sister's bachelorette's coming up soon, and the writer wants to know how and when she should say something. And in the third letter, we hear from Not So Privileged, and this letter feels misunderstood by one of her friends, who she thinks they have a similar background, but this friend keeps thinking that she's right-wing, or, as the writer says, more privileged than she is. As always on the show, our goal here is to learn more about ourselves and each other, give us greater insight into our emotions, and of course, make us feel less alone. If you'd like to submit a letter for this podcast or for Instagram or TikTok or any of the places where I answer advice letters, send it to hellohayes@gmail.com. And make sure to subscribe and follow me so you don't miss it when I post. And with that, let's do our letters for today. Hello, Hayes. I have a friendship that has me at a loss right now. She and I have been friends since the 5th grade, and we're both 27 years old. It's misleading to say it's one friendship, actually. It's kind of 2. The other friend involved has also been in my life since the 3rd grade, and we've been in the same friend group for years. Now those 2 friends are married. I set them up during our junior year of high school. Let's call them Margot and Sam. In 2020, my long-term boyfriend of 6 years and I broke up, and I went through a hoe phase. It feels like I shouldn't call it that, but I don't really know how else to put it. I should note that we all grew up in the same church, me, Margot, and Sam, which colors the story slightly. Margot and Sam were each other's first and only, and they knew that I was intimately involved with my ex, and they never judged me for that. However, I started to get lots of judgment and snide comments during my hoe phase. During that time, I hooked up with somebody that we all knew from middle and high school, and I told Margot about it, citing that it was a mistake and I shouldn't have done it. She didn't seem off about it besides the underhanded slut-shaming comments that at this point I was used to. The next day, though, she called me expressing how hurt she was by my actions. She said, "I'm extremely hurt that you slept with my ex-boyfriend, and I never thought you would do something like that. I know it sounds right off the bat, Hayes, but when they dated, they were in 6th grade, and now she's married." I really didn't even connect that she had considered this guy her boyfriend. I, of course, apologized, and I truly would not have gotten involved with him if I thought this was going to be an issue. Maybe I'm being insensitive and not understanding, but it was in middle school for 1 month. We got through that situation, although I never told her how it made me feel. I thought it was best to just move on. Fast forward to now, and I'm dating somebody wonderful. We've been together for about a year and a half, and have talked about our future many times. Well, I went to Margot and Sam's a few months ago to celebrate our birthdays, and I was telling them about how things were going in my relationship. All of a sudden, Sam goes, "I doubt you'll get a ring from him. At our age, it shouldn't take a year and a half to commit." Sam has always been the more openly judgmental of the 2 of them, and for that reason, I've distanced myself more from him. I know these might seem like small, silly things, and I haven't been completely acting in the right in some situations either, but I just don't know what to do. I feel like every time I'm around them, I end up feeling so shitty about myself, but I don't know if it's worth it to have an open conversation. Margot's horrible with confrontation, and there's so much more to the situation with Sam that this letter would be a book if I got into it all. I'm at a loss, Hayes. I never realized how much their judgment got to me until Sam's ring comment. We've been friends so long it seems sad to let it go over some slut-shaming and hurt feelings, but I get so nervous thinking about when my partner and I do tie the knot that Margot thinks she'd be a bridesmaid. Not to mention the thought of Sam even being at the wedding makes me want to elope. What do you think I should do? Yours, will I always be slut-shamed? Okay, first thing, these are not small, silly things. This is repeated disrespect and bullying and shaming, and that's not small and silly. I'm so sorry that your friends have been treating you like this. It's not okay, and they don't sound like your friends, particularly, do I want to jump to the conclusion and say they don't sound like your friends? They don't sound like good friends. They sound like they've got a lot of their own shit going on and they're doing quite a bit of projecting onto you. Maybe they have good intentions, though hard for me to believe that, but their intentions don't really matter here. Their impact does. And the impact this is having on you makes me want to tell you to distance yourself from these people. But Let's go back. So I'm really curious about what these other details. You mentioned that you could write a whole book about your relationship with Sam, and I'm curious what those are, though you didn't want to get into them, so we're not gonna get into them. Let's talk about how you're calling this a hoe phase. You said that you don't know what else to call it, but I think don't call it a hoe phase. It's one thing if you are reclaiming the word and you feel proud of it, but the way you're writing it in your letter to me, it sounds like you're judging yourself for it. So let's call it anything else. For example, you were having fun, you were experimenting, you were sleeping around. Even if you don't want to frame it in a positive way, even saying, I learned a lot about myself. I did some things, I would handle things differently now if I could. Even referring to that, period of your life in a way that isn't using such like stigmatized language, I think is important for how you see yourself. Now, if I'm misreading that and you feel pride over calling it a hoe phase, then, do you. The way you talk to yourself about this time in your life matters, especially if you're up against these people who are trying to make you feel bad about it. So let me also say that there's nothing wrong with what you did. There's nothing wrong with having that phase, with especially after 6 years of being with one person. That's a long time. I imagine that having that phase is part of what brought you to be ready for this new relationship. So this was a good thing, right? This was a good thing that you learned from, or we don't even need to call it good or bad. It was just a time in your life that you learned from, and you don't need to make yourself feel bad about it, and you certainly don't need to spend time with people who are going to make you feel bad about it. I really am angry with them for making comments. I really am angry with them for making comments about this to you. They can live their life however they want to, and may they be happy. But their beliefs, it is not okay for them to project their beliefs onto you and to make you feel bad about yourself and to say passive aggressive things to you, snide, snarky things to you about your relationships, what you choose to do with your body. Not okay. And my God, the Margot thing about the boyfriend, I'm sorry. It'd be one thing if maybe you guys were like a freshman, or if you were still in high school, maybe I could see a world where she was upset that you hooked up with her sixth grade boyfriend. But you're 27 years old. Sixth grade, what, are you 11 or 12 then? No, she doesn't. If Margot wrote to me and said, I'm 27 and one of my oldest friends slept with a guy I dated for a month when I was 11, can I confront her about it? I'd say, hell no. I'd say, you swallow that, you tell someone else. That's something you take to the grave. That's not something, no. No. I mean, is that true? Like, let me just check myself on that, because I am having a strong reaction. I might be having a strong reaction because of the other details here. Like, the fact that Margot, it's interesting, because is it Margot or is it Sam? Is Sam like the ringleader of the two of them being judgmental towards you? And maybe Margot reacting about the sixth grade boyfriend could be like a side effect of what's going on in her relationship with Sam. That could make a lot of sense, but I'm not going to analyze Margot and Sam's relationship through the lens of your letter. But that's the way that I'm going to empathize with Margot. The only reason I can see somebody who's married and 27 years old feeling threatened or upset by her friend sleeping with someone who you dated in middle school for a month is if she's really battling some relationship stuff or repressed stuff on her own. And I see why you reacted that way. I see why when she confronted you about that, you felt the best thing to do was just apologize and move on. I think I could see myself reacting in a similar way. You didn't need to apologize there. That's one of those tricky apology situations where it's like, you don't need to, you didn't do anything wrong. So do you apologize for something you didn't do wrong? I think if you and Margot are close friends, sometimes it's okay to apologize for the impact, right? If we're talking about impact over intent, you can apologize for the impact your action had on someone, even if you don't think it was wrong. Now we can be like more generous about those apologies in certain relationships when they're like healthy, loving, caring relationships. when they're not, when these relationships are uneven or unstable, then I would caution you to not be apologizing for shit you shouldn't be apologizing for. I do see why you reacted the way you did, just to try to smooth that over because of how ridiculous that was. So I think you made the right move there. Also, like, why did you tell her before you realized that she was upset because this guy was her ex? I don't even want to call him her ex. You said that when you told her about it, you felt like it was a mistake and you shouldn't have done it. Why did you feel that way? If you were saying that to her, if you were sharing that with her vulnerably because you regretted sleeping with him, and it was that regret you felt or remorse you felt, or, this icky kind of morning after feeling, if that had nothing to do with her and her middle school crush on him, that actually makes me even more mad that she came around and made it about her. I think you did the best you could at the time, but I don't like how that was handled. I don't like how she made you feel and how she treated you there, which is going to come back in the end when we figure out what to do. But let's talk about that birthday dinner. Let's talk about that birthday dinner when Sam said, "I doubt you'll get a ring from him." First of all, let's just debunk that. 27 is young. 27 is young, and absolutely a 27-year-old might need more than a year and a half to know if they're ready for marriage. What? Maybe Sam didn't need a year and a half, but some people do. This is where I hate the "if he wanted to, he would" type language. People can take as much time as they need that works for their relationship. If you were demanding an answer from your new partner, or you're demanding a commitment from your partner sooner than a year and a half, and your partner wasn't able to give it to you, then that would be an issue that the two of you decide together. But no one else can come in and say, if he doesn't know in a year and a half, it's never going to happen. That's not true. You guys know the story of, I was younger, but after 3 years of dating, I was ready to move in with Brian, and he was not ready to move in with me. And we almost broke up over it at the time because of comments like that. I had internalized all of that noise, that if something isn't happening on the same timeline as everybody else, that it's a sign that something's wrong. And that simply isn't true. And shame on him for saying that to you. He's out there shaming you, shame on him. Ugh. If you feel shitty about yourself every time you're with them, I think you have your information. And you say, is it worth having an open conversation? That's a question I ask myself often, or not necessarily often now, but like that line of thinking, like, is it worth addressing this? Or do I kind of just take matters into my own hands? Like, do I actually already have the information I need? And nothing they could really say is going to change that at this point. And there's merit to both. I think there's more merit to addressing it with them if you are interested in repairing. And at this point, if this has been, it's 2024, if this slut shaming and snide comments about your relationships began 4 years ago, you might be well and done. And that would be okay. And I think that distancing yourself doesn't necessarily mean breaking off the friendship, though it might. But it could mean, not doing things like going to their house alone for dinner. Maybe you don't go to their house at all. Maybe you start to just see them when you're getting together with a larger group of childhood friends, if that's still happening. If that kind of drifting is available to you, that could be something you do. It sounds like Sam is a person that you feel more uncomfortable or unsafe around. So I'd say I don't think you need to have a conversation with him. I know you said Margot was horrible with confrontation, though maybe she's the person you have the conversation with. Though as I'm saying it, I feel conflicted because if Margot is acting the way she is because of Sam, or in part because of her husband Sam, is it fair to kind of put that on Margot and make Margot bear like the emotional burden of dealing with Sam's behavior? But Margot's your friend, and maybe if Margot wasn't your friend, I would say talk directly to Sam. I don't know. The more I talk this out, I'm feeling like if you don't want to have a conversation with these people, I don't think you owe it to them to do that. I don't think you owe it to them or to your lifelong friendship to address it. I really don't. Only do it if you feel like you owe it to yourself. If you feel like, they've been walking all over me for 4 years and I've never said anything. And I want to say, hey, you've been making comments like this, and this is how it's made me feel. And then you could decide, you say something like, if that continues, I'm not going to be able to hang out with you anymore. You could set the boundary that way. Like, if you can't respect me by not commenting about my body and my relationship, then this friendship can't continue. I won't participate in this friendship anymore. Or you could say nothing like that and just say, I've been reflecting a lot, and over the past 4 years, I have felt this way, X, and that makes me really sad, and I wanted to share that with you. Call it a day. They may apologize, they may not, but if you want to address it, do it for yourself, but you don't owe it. I don't think you owe it to them. If you feel sick, if you want to elope at the thought of him being at your wedding, this is your body like sending you all these warning signs that something isn't right, no matter how long they've been in your life. I wrote down a few reflection questions that maybe could help you think through whether you want to address something with them. So one, is this friendship worth trying to resurrect? Is it worth it to you? There's no right or wrong answers here. Like, is it worth it? Yes or no? Can you look past your difference in values? You can absolutely be friends with people who have different values than you. It becomes tricky when some people are trying to force their values onto others and then make them feel bad with their words or actions for not living the same way they do. So can you look past your difference in values? We can't control whether they can, but can you? Now that it's gone this way, will you be able to move on? And then ask yourself, am I in a place where I can have this conversation with them without it impacting my self-esteem? I think sometimes we think that standing up for ourselves means like saying what we need to say no matter the impact it has on us. And I don't think that's true. I think sometimes taking care of ourselves means realizing I'm not ready actually to have that conversation. And also, who else in my life can I lean on? If I were going to have this conversation with old friends, I'd want to make sure it would be helpful for me to really root myself in the other relationships that feel good. Both with my partner, yes, but with friends too. Because since this is a friendship loss in some way, backing yourself up with the other non-romantic relationships in your life that, fulfill you will be really helpful for you here. So will you always be slut shamed? No, you will not always be slut shamed, and I'm so sorry that they've treated you that way and that you've internalized some of it. Though it sounds actually like you've done a pretty good job at not internalizing it, and you know that it's a bunch of baloney. Okay, next one. Hello, Hayes. My older sister and I have mostly always gotten along, bar from normal sibling disagreements. She's 26 and I'm 19. I'd say we're close, and I'm going to be a bridesmaid soon. But over the last couple of years, I've noticed her making comments about me that really impact my confidence. First, there's the way she talks about how I ride horses. For context, we work together on our family farm when I'm home from school, and we've ridden horses basically since we could both sit up straight. Back in 2021, I overheard my mom telling my sister on the phone that I had ridden one of our younger horses that day, and my sister responded saying, "What did the horse do to deserve that?" I'll admit that my sister and mom are miles better at me than riding, and I know I have a long way to go to improve, but that comment felt unfair. When prompted about it, my sister said, "That horse is a bit young to be ruined just yet." This talk has continued since then, and just last week something similar happened. Now it's cemented in my brain that she thinks I'm incapable at riding. She also constantly feels the need to comment on my exercise, diet, body, and clothing choices. Here in my country, she's comfortably straight-sized, and I'm borderline plus-sized and carry a lot of weight in my thighs, hips, and belly. She often criticizes me for wearing short shorts, as if she didn't wear those kinds of shorts when she was my age. I've had a lot of body image and confidence issues over the years, and I've worked really hard to improve not only that, but my relationship and anxieties around food and exercise. Her comments always drag me right back down, though. When she criticized the short bike pants I was wearing this evening, I sarcastically responded, "Thanks, that's really useful," to which she responded, "Well, not everything I say has to be useful." I then went to change because I no longer felt comfortable in my skin, even though what I really wanted to do was jump into the pool because it's so hot. It's getting to the point where I need to address this with her. Her bachelorette is coming up at the beach, and I don't need her comments about me in a swimsuit or me sucking at yoga while we're there. I'm also finding myself angry and frustrated with her, and I wish I wasn't. I think she genuinely thinks she's being helpful. Do you have any tips? Yours, stressed sister. Sibling dynamics are so interesting, right? Because on one hand, you're describing yourself as close, and that you've mostly gotten along except for a few disagreements. And then you describe some of these specific examples. And, the riding the horses example and the comments about your body and the clothes example, I think are really good ones, because there is a world where both of those comments are just like a sibling kind of being a mean sibling. Now, the body comments are much more loaded, of course. It's impossible to look at a sister's comments about your shorts being too small or whatever it is without also looking at like the history of the body, the fat phobic world we live in, and unrealistic beauty standards, and like there's a whole, body dysmorphia. There's a whole world to unpack underneath those comments. But the horse thing alone, to me, is like classic a sibling bully. And that doesn't mean it's okay, but they're just interesting examples to juxtapose. One that is much more emotional, though maybe the horse example is emotional for you, especially if you, like, am I projecting onto that here? Maybe the horse example is just as emotional or personal for you because of your family farm, because of how riding horses, because of how deeply ingrained that is into your family. I agree with you that you absolutely need to say something, because now that you're both getting older, this is something that could take your relationship, which has been mostly great, as you've said, mostly good. It could turn it now to sour as you get older, because as we get older, we put up with less shit, right? So I agree with you that you need to say something. I think my recommendation would be to pick one thing to say something about, rather than kind of have a burst of you are always criticizing me, and here's the long list of ways. I would probably pick one specific example to back up the case that she has been picking on you. Originally, I was going to suggest you talk about the body comments, and I still think that might be my recommendation, but I would empower you to think about which comment between the horse comments and the body comments are the ones that are really making you feel sad. And I would lead with that, because I do think that sometimes with siblings, the best way to deal with a sibling kind of being snarky is to ignore them. Like, my brother was just here for a week, and my brother is 23. I'm 8.5 years older than him. He stayed with us for a week. There were definitely things that he said or like did that I was like, are you fucking being, like, why are you being snarky? Like, why are you being like that? And I think that when you spend a lot of concentrated time with siblings, you do have to pick your battles and trust that that it's out of love, that they're just kind of in a pissy mood, and try to let it roll off your shoulder. It will be easier for you if you can let some things roll off your shoulder. If I were in your shoes, I would let the horse comments roll off my shoulder more than I would let the body comments roll off my shoulder, because I personally am more protective over comments about my body. Now, I'd also when you think about how you want to address this with her, I think you take into consideration a little bit like what you know to be true about your sister and where your relationship has been strong in the past. Like, do you guys have heart-to-hearts? Does she respond well to like your feelings? The example you gave about the bike shorts, and you said that's really useful when she made a comment, and she said, well, not everything I say has to be useful. Okay, let's talk about that example. I would have said something just like you, for what it's worth, like something kind of a little bit sarcastic rather than saying exactly what I mean, because you didn't mean that's useful. You're being sarcastic, but what you meant is that hurts my feelings. Don't comment on my body. When you say that, it makes me feel insecure, and I like the way I look, and that's all that matters. She clearly does not respond well to sarcasm. If your hope with that comment, your true hope, when you said, well, that's really useful, if your hope was that she'd say, you're right, my bad, I'm sorry, it wasn't effective, right? What you said wasn't effective at that goal. If sarcasm doesn't work, or if we have evidence to see that sarcasm doesn't work with her, would earnestness work? I think earnestness is always the way to go. If you listen to the Haley Jacobson conversation, we had the podcast interview from a few weeks ago. We had a great little moment about earnestness. I think especially with family, especially with people who we are close with, I would be earnest. I'd be earnest, and I'd tell her how those comments make you feel. You can say exactly what you said to me. I've worked really hard to improve my relationship with food and exercise. But the comments about my body drag me back down. Please stop making them. You said that she's comfortably straight-sized, whereas you're borderline plus-sized. I know that we can't have this conversation without thinking about that too. I can imagine that if she's saying things about her body and how bodies should look and what types of bodies can wear short shorts and not. I want to acknowledge that that's got to feel really painful for you. And I think that you could have a conversation with her about that if you're comfortable, right? It's not your job to kind of educate her or to show her, but she is your sister. And if you feel safe and comfortable to do it, I think maybe it could be a moment of closeness for the two of you. You know, I'm really giving her a lot of benefit of the doubt. I have a hard time. I really have a hard time. I have a hard time empathizing with how anybody could think that it's okay to comment on someone else's body, though sisters and siblings can be. I actually, you know what? I made some comments about how I think I made some comments when my brother was here about how I thought his shirts were tight. And maybe I shouldn't have done that. Maybe I'm out here sitting here being like, how could anybody tell someone that their shorts are too short and too tight when I just did that to my brother? So, and I would want him to give me the benefit of the doubt, and I'd want him to say to me, Alexandra, that hurts my feelings. I think all of that's to say, try having an earnest conversation with her if you feel, if that feels like something that you can do. And if there's anything that she could do that would be helpful. You said that you genuinely think she thinks she's being helpful. Maybe in that conversation, if there's anything she can do that would be helpful, you could tell her that. Sometimes when we're really trying to help someone like get out of their ways, like I'm sure your sister's pretty stuck in some of these ways, as many of us are around bodies. It would be to come and say, you know, I think you're trying to be helpful when you say X, but this is actually the impact it has on me. What would be helpful is for you to do this other specific thing. People like to be helpful, they like to feel useful. Though your sister did literally say, well, not everything I say has to be useful, that I think that was just in like a sisterly, snarky moment. I hope that she didn't actually mean that when push comes to shove. So that's what I'd say. And if that conversation doesn't go well, because I know that sometimes these conversations don't go well, you will have to see what you can tolerate. And that's sort of what happens with family or with any close relationships. You can set your boundary, or you can have the initial conversation before a boundary, you know, a hard boundary is set. And then you have to decide, what am I willing to ignore and what am I not willing to ignore and put up with? And how am I going to change the way I behave or interact in this space? So if your sister can't stop making comments about how you look in a bathing suit, if she can't stop criticizing your body, there could be a world where you don't go to the bachelorette, right? I hope it doesn't come to that. And I think when anyone is in one of these situations where it's like, this person won't stop doing this thing and it's making me hate myself, we all do ultimately have to decide, well, I don't have any good option here, do I? I either continue to participate in this relationship and talk and hang out with this person I love, who I'm close to, and sacrifice my mental health in that way. So that's one bad option. Or I let them go and I miss them and I grieve and I'm sad that I don't get to have the relationship with them that other people have with their sisters. But I won't put myself in that position, and I will choose the grief over being subjected to the ridicule. I think sometimes being an adult and taking care of ourselves is choosing between two shitty options. I hope you don't have to do that. But if you do, then you know where to find me. We can talk about that too. Okay. Hello, Hayes. I have a friend who constantly tries to point out how privileged my life has been in a way that feels like a dig. I have had a privileged life in some ways, and I'm very upfront, but not ashamed about it, although it's not always been simple for me. I hide most of the bad stuff, like my dad's unemployment, out of his embarrassment and my own. I also probably come across as more privileged than I am because of receiving scholarships to private schools and the huge sacrifices my parents made because they value education. It's small stuff that always gets phrased negatively by my friend, like how I can pay for dental care or get an eye test. I live in a country with free health care, but many people, myself included, opt for private because of long waiting lists. With this friend, any achievement of mine often seems negatively slanted as a function of the advantages that were bought for me. The irony is, I think we have similar backgrounds, but she doesn't seem to think so. I feel like I'm portrayed as some prissy rich girl to her humble origins, when that's not true. Even stuff like politics, she insists that I'm right-wing, despite my personal protests that I'm not. I like her, but she has quite a dominating personality, which in many ways I'm fine with, and in general is quite strong in her opinions, and would not listen if I brought it up. I'm also very anti-confrontational due to a horrible parental divorce, and really can't bear arguments with friends. It also might just be in my head. What do you think? Yours? Not so privileged. Okay, so I want to take your friend completely out of this for a second. We will come back to the friend and talk about what the friend, how the friend might be, creating conflict and all of that. But I want to first talk about, let's take the friend out. You seem to be having a really hard time talking about, thinking about, recognizing your privileges. And I think that that's because it's uncomfortable. Reckoning with your privilege is not supposed to be easy or a walk in the park. It's not supposed to make you feel comfortable. It's supposed to make you feel uncomfortable. So in that way, the fact that you're resisting it means you're noticing that it's uncomfortable, which is a step. I want to point out a few things. You said that you come across as more privileged than you are because of receiving scholarships to private schools. Being able to receive scholarships, being on the receiving end of a scholarship, is a privilege. Are you as financially privileged as someone who was able to pay for the private school without the scholarship or without a loan? They have more privilege than you, but this isn't, it's not a competition. But the fact that you attended private school, on scholarship or not, is an educational privilege. Another line in the letter that I think is worth calling out is you said, you seem more privileged than you are because of the huge sacrifices your parents made, because they value education. Those sacrifices are also a privilege. It doesn't mean that your life is without hardship and that your parents maybe didn't experience loss, but I want you to try to recognize that some people value education and are still not able to get their kids into private schools via scholarship. Not having access to some of the things you've had access to does not mean that other people didn't value it. Your parents' values, the positions, the sacrifices they made, as you said, these are all parts of your educational privilege. Paying for dental care, having private insurance, these are all privileges. And I'm curious about why it's feeling hard, you feel the need to caveat those. I have these privileges, but it hasn't been easy. And I think that it's one of the pitfalls that we can fall into when talking about our privilege is saying it, but then feeling guilty about it and needing to qualify why we actually haven't had it all that easy. And I suppose actually that's probably part of why this is hard for you to reckon with, because you yourself are a intersectional being. And when we talk about intersectionality, it's all of the ways in which our identities come together, right? You can't look at someone just based on one part of them and make an assessment about the advantages and disadvantages they've had. For example, feminism. To take an intersectional look at feminism would mean that you understand that I, Hayes, as a, white cisgender woman, I do not have the same experience as a Black woman with a disability. We are both women, yes, but when we look at our identities in an intersectional way, which we must, we see that we have different experiences. And you yourself are a kaleidoscope of different identities, and I get the sense that you want to be known for the ways in which your identity intersects. And there are things you hide behind the surface, right? Like your dad's unemployment, which you say you hide out of embarrassment. I imagine that experience has made you, that experience didn't feel like a privilege with whatever came with that. It sounds like part of why it's hard for you to accept and kind of sit with your privilege is because maybe it's making you feel like to have privilege is to mean that you can't have pain, but it's not, right? I can say that I have so much privilege. I sit here with I sit here with so much privilege, and my privilege doesn't have to do with the way I feel about my grief and my hardship and the hard things I've experienced. Is that the way? Is that how I'm trying to say this? I'm giving that example because you still have a right to your pain, even though you are privileged. But you do yourself and your friendships and all of your relationships a disservice if you always are couching your privilege with caveats about how you're actually not that privileged and how I actually have all of these hard things. Let's talk about the friend. So you mentioned that certain things get phrased negatively by this friend, and by that I think you mean she maybe takes them out of context from your perspective, such as paying for dental care or getting an eye test. Well, what do you know about your friend? You said you think you come from similar backgrounds, but what do you know? What do you know about her? Because I think part of understanding your privilege is about self-awareness, about I was going to say knowing your audience, but let me unpack what I mean by that more. If your friend does not have access to dental care, or I know you said where you are there's free healthcare, but if she doesn't have the same type of access to dental care that you have, and you're sitting there talking about your Invisalign and I don't know, some of the like more luxurious ways that you've had, your teeth taken care of, and you're sitting there talking with this friend and you're complaining about something that your friend might feel lucky to have access to. That would be a situation where you seem like you're not taking into consideration the privilege you have. Now, that doesn't mean you can't talk about your experience getting Invisalign with your friend, but you want to be aware of how you come to that conversation. And you can only be aware of how you come to that conversation by being aware of your privilege. If you're not acknowledging the privilege that you have, that you can pay for private dental care, how are you possibly going to approach a conversation with somebody else in a self-reflective way? I could very well see a world where this friend does make comments that are kind of pointed. Like you said, any achievement of mine seems negatively slanted as a function of the advantages that were bought for me. Though I do have to ask, is she saying stuff, or is this you in your own head? Are you so uncomfortably aware of your privilege around this friend that you are uncomfortable talking about it? Because it's forcing you to reckon with the privileges you have. I know it's uncomfortable, but I think the way through that with this friend is to talk about it. That doesn't mean that every single thing you say needs to be couched with, not needs to begin with, I recognize that I'm privileged and X. Being aware of your privilege, I think, can also look like asking your friend questions about their experience, right? Being open to learning, being open to reflecting. Politics stuff. She insists that you're right wing. Dude, what does that mean? What does that mean? Have you said anything, or have you acted in ways that are making this friend react that way to you? And if you don't know, ask. Next time she says something like that, what if you said, what makes you say that? I don't identify as being right wing, and I've said that to you, but you keep making these comments. I'm curious, what's making you say that? I feel like so often someone will say something to us in person, we have a weird reaction to it, or we feel weird about it, but we don't really recognize it in the moment, and then we get upset later and we wish we said something. I've been trying to get more practiced at unemotionally. I try asking, what do you mean by that? Or I'm having trouble understanding. Can you explain that further to me? Because sometimes someone just doesn't say something right the first time and they actually mean something else. And if you just ask them to explain themselves a little bit more, you can prevent yourself from stewing on it later. But also, your friend, if she makes some kind of snide comment about how you're right wing after you say something and you say, well, what do you mean by that? You might actually have a real moment to reflect on what you said. Maybe you said something insensitive. This could be a moment for you to learn. This is how we learn, right? None of us are perfect. We all have more learning to do. It does happen in hard conversations like this. And if you two are friends, you have these conversations with friends. This is where change happens. There's of course the chance that you two just are butting heads and this isn't going to be a long-lasting friendship. But since you're close enough where you're writing to me about her, I think you address this with her. I think it's important for your friendship, but I think it's important for you. But I only want you to have that conversation with her if you can go into it with your arms down and your heart open. The biggest action item here for you is to just kind of sit and think about your privilege, to think about the ways you're privileged, and to practice not following up the privilege with something to counteract it. You are privileged. You also are all these other things. But practice just kind of sitting with that and accepting that. And that is it for today. Thanks, guys. As I said in the beginning, if you have a letter you'd like to submit, you can send it to hellohayes@gmail.com. Make sure that you're following me on Instagram at AFHayes and Hello Hayes on TikTok, on Substack. I answer, and of course on YouTube, Alexandra Hayes Robinson, but if you search Hello Hayes, it'll come up. God, the name thing is always so complicated. Why will it ever be easy for me? Will it ever be easy with my name? I'm so grateful that you guys write to me. Thank you for helping me make Hello Hayes. If you have ideas for future topics that you'd like to see, please let me know. You can email that to me, comment on the video. I'd love to, we make these episodes together. All right, I'll see you next week.